Greetings, everybody. My name is Melina Abdullah. I'm co-founder of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, director of Black Lives Matter Grassroots, and I'm also a mom of Tandiwe, Amara, and Amen, 3 children. And we are really excited. Oh, and I'm a professor. I forgot I have a real job. I'm a professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. And I'm very excited to be having this conversation with 3 of my dearest comrades and friends and really spirit family, movement family, about the People's Response Act and about why we not only have to reimagine public safety, but build new models of public safety in this country and what we're doing in Los Angeles to make it so. And so part of this conversation are 2 of my favorite comrades, Megan Castillo, who is a action team member for Black Lives Matter Los Angeles, and also the director of Reimagine LA. And we are working on making sure that we invest in the things that actually make communities safe rather than police, prisons, and jails. And Megan is leading much of that work. We're also joined by Joseph Williams, a core team member of Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and director of the schools LA Students Deserve. He gets to work every day with really, really brilliant young people. I think beginning in, how young are your youngest kids? Are they elementary school or middle school?
We got elementary
school.
students.
Elementary school students who have the courage and vision to say, this is what we need as young people to keep us safe, to help us become our greatest selves. And so we just want to kind of introduce some of the work that we're doing in Los Angeles. And then on her lunch break, we're going to be joined by co-founder of the Black Lives Matter Youth Vanguard, and someone I'm grateful to be able to call my daughter, Amara Keone Abdullah, is going to be joining us as she gets her lunch break. She's at school right now, but we want to remember that it is actually the work of our young people who are leading this effort to get cops off campus and make sure that we have resources like librarians and nurses and smaller class sizes and teachers and counselors and all of the things that actually build safe schools. So she's going to be joining us towards the end of our conversation, but we're going to hop right into it because we know that just like Los Angeles was the site where Black Lives Matter was birthed and founded, Los Angeles continues to be a really, really important place for not only, again, the reimagining of public safety, remembering that public safety, especially for Black folks, is grounded in strong communities and resource-rich communities, not police, not prisons, not jails. And we're going to talk about how we're working to make that so. So we're reimagining and building new systems of public safety. And so we've been talking a lot about elections. We've been talking about a lot about what voters in this country want. We've been talking a lot about nationally about what legislation should look like. And we know that the People's Response Act is a very courageous piece of legislation that says that especially in Black communities, but remembering that as Lonnie Guadir, the brilliant legal scholar says, Black people are the miner's canary, right? So what happens to Black people will eventually befall all people. So what makes Black communities safe also makes everyone else safe, right? So we're remembering that. And as Representative Bush is kind of leading the way with this People's Response Act, she's saying that let's invest deeply in mental health resources. Let's invest deeply in healthcare. Let's invest deeply in education, and let's make sure that we don't spend on the things that actually make communities, especially Black community, unsafe. Let's divest from those things so that we can have the dollars to invest in the things that actually make communities safe. That's what the People's Response Act is all about. But that's also the work of reimagining and building new systems of public safety. So I'm talking too long, but I want to introduce Megan Castillo to kind of talk about how that's panned out and what voters in Los Angeles have said time and time again, especially with the landslide victory of Measure J, which seeks to invest in the things that make communities safe. That passed by a landslide in November, less than a year ago, or just a year ago. Megan Castillo, can you talk with us about what voters, what the people of Los Angeles County want in terms of reimagining and building new systems of public safety?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. So here in Los Angeles County, we have the largest jail system in the country, and it's home to one of the most inhumane facilities. And our jails kind of function as mental health facilities in a way. And so if we're being honest, right, our mental health crisis is masked behind the bars. And so one of the things that's coming up is Measure J is a specific piece of legislation that invests in improving the material conditions of Black folks, and particularly Black folks who have been impacted by mental health and the lack thereof resources, right? And so Measure J passed with an overwhelming amount of 57.1% of voters, which is about 2.1 million voters, who showed that they want to full-heartedly support investments of care and reinvestment into communities that have historically been divested from. And rather than continuing investing in the carceral system that I mentioned, it's about investing and undoing some of those harms to really invest and pour into our communities in a way that actually makes sense, in a way that actually matters, right? So we know doing things over and over again is a form of insanity. And so this really calls into question, why are we pouring dollars into the carceral state when there are other options and other opportunities for us to really create conditions that impact our communities in a way that is beneficial?
That's so good what you're saying. And Megan, there were specific areas of investment, right? And we want to remember that when we throw money at the carceral system, when we throw money at sheriffs, when we throw money at police, that actually isn't even investment. So we use terms like invest, divest, but we know that it's really invest, don't waste, right? We are wasting dollars. We are spending dollars that don't yield returns when we spend on the carceral system, when we spend on police, when we spend on jails, when we spend on sheriffs. What are some of the things that the voters in Los Angeles, but also you as one of really the courageous visionaries who's pushing a reimagining, what are some of the things we should be spending on, we should be actually investing in?
Right. So the major pockets that Measure J seeks to invest in include education, housing, youth services, employment services, mental health services, right? And making sure that we're actually putting our dollars where our mouth is, right? So if we're saying that there's a houseless issue, if we're saying that there's a homeless issue, or that we're not investing in our youth, then why don't we actually funnel those dollars directly into the departments that are designed to really support those efforts, right? Making sure that we're actually getting dollars into community-based organizations that have the reach and have the capacity to support folks on the ground, right? So that's kind of the wheelhouse by which Measure J seeks to do, right? It's really looking at and interrogating the county budget and reallocating the dollars that go into the carceral system and investing directly into the pockets of our lives that actually make sense.
So you mentioned housing, mental health care, reentry programs, youth programs. Those are the kinds of things that are actual investments that yield return, right? And so over and over again, the people of Los Angeles have said, this is where we want our tax dollars to go. We don't want to continue to fund, as you said, the largest jail system in the country. We don't want to continue to fund a sheriff's department that has been shown to have gangs, deputy gangs. This is a national story now, right? That there are actually deputy gangs within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's departments that target our people for murder, that also target our people for incarceration. I'm thinking about people like Jay Burton, who's been locked up for 32 years since he was almost 33 now, 33 years now. He's been locked up since he was 16 years old. You know, and this is one story. We have lots and lots of stories of people who were spending money to incarcerate when we could be spending those dollars to really house folks, get people living wage jobs, make sure they have the resources that are necessary. And that's true in community. It's also true in our schools. And Joseph, some of the most powerful work, you know, people have talked about 2020 as this Black Lives Matter moment. We know as Black Lives Matter organizers that we've been building Black Lives Matter for more than 8.5 years now, right? Or for about 8.5 years now. So this is not just a flash in the pan. We've been doing this work, and gratefully we had a movement to meet the moment. But we know that for the last year and a half, when we talk about the uprisings that happened, you know, after the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, nationally, but also here in Los Angeles, when we talk about murders like the killing of Dijon Kazee and Fred Williams and so many others, that there were massive uprisings. And people said, let's divest from jails, prisons, sheriffs, police. But also that's true, especially at schools, right? I always say that as a mother of 3 LAUSD school children, that if there's one place police don't belong, it's on our school campuses, that our children deserve, students deserve, right, to have places where their intellect, their creativity, their brilliance, their spirits can be nurtured, not where they are intimidated and, you know, kind of terrorized at the hands of school police. And that was also one of the sites of the greatest victory over the last year and a half. Can you talk about what's been happening on our school campuses in terms of reimagining what school safety looks like and building new systems of school safety?
Absolutely. And thank you for that introduction. Because I think it's important to name that this work has been ongoing. This work is not something that popped up after George Floyd, that, you know, including the work for police-free schools, right? And I want to uplift BOP, the Black Organizing Project in Oakland, that has had, you know, over a decade-long campaign, and finally in 2021, fully police-free schools and the abolition of the school police department in Oakland. And here in LA, we've also been waging a long campaign against the criminalization of our youth, right? This is something that has been a fact, right? Something that's been happening for years, for decades. And the work that was already existing was amplified by, you know, the uprisings in 2020. And so some really important work around pushing to end the criminalization of youth in LAUSD, which is the second largest school district in the country, right, has happened in the last few years. So in 2020, we were able to push, you know, again, like you said, with student leadership really being the impetus behind these major victories. And you mentioned Dijon Kazee, who was murdered in 2020. His little brother, Sean Jones, was a student, right, who was involved in SJLI and Students Deserve, and pushing for police-free schools. And also Michael Lewis Sr., who was murdered in Kern County, his niece, Jamila Lewis, right, it has been heavily involved in Students Deserve. So folks who have been pushing for this work, students, youth, our youth in these communities who have been pushing for this work, have also been personally impacted by police murder and police violence. And so, you know, so often we've heard, oh, well, school police are different, right? They're not these police who are killing people in the streets. And I also have to name that, you know, we've seen time and time again school police violence occurring, right, in LAUSD and in other districts. And recently, you know, a tragic incident, a murder, right, at the hands of a school security officer in Long Beach. took the life of Mona Rodriguez, an 18-year-old student or recent student who was also the mother of a 5-month-old baby, who her life was stolen by a school police officer. And so, again, the work has been ongoing, and also the reasons why we must continue this work, and we must continue to push for fully police-free schools and transformative forms of violence prevention, intervention, and de-escalation continue to happen as well. And so we were able in LAUSD last year to push for a cut of $25 million from the Los Angeles School Police Department, the largest school-specific police department in the country. Not only were we able to push for a $25 million cut, which is about a third of their almost $80 million per year budget, but we were also able to push cops off campus, meaning that no cops are able to be stationed permanently on LAUSD campuses as they previously were. So huge student-led victories around pushing towards the end of criminalization in LAUSD. And we see that, of course, coming back to school after an unprecedented global pandemic, right, which has affected families in so many ways, students and families, in not only health and the losses, the deaths of their loved ones and family members and community members, but trauma in so many ways. Financially, housing insecurity has been on the rise, food insecurity. Again, so many things are affecting students. And so we know that, yes, of course, as we come back to campuses, there are fights now, there are incidents that are happening, and we have to continue to push for a trauma-informed response to these things, right? And to different systems and structures to respond to these incidences, and just to respond to the trauma that students and families are dealing with during this time. And so, the work that we've been able to push to defund school police has also been connected to the creation of a Black Student Achievement Plan, which seeks to also look at Black student achievement holistically, and not just about test scores and showing up to class, but what are the indicators of Black student and family health and achievement, and the ability to have successful school environments. And so that has meant investment in psychiatric social workers, in restorative justice teachers, in additional counselors, secondary counselors, academic counselors, and pupil services and attendance counselors at schools in LAUSD with the highest numbers of Black students. And we know, as you named earlier, Dr. Abdullah, that these resources are also impacting and bring additional resources to all of our students in these schools, right? And so it's hugely important that we continue to move this work to transform the way that we view trauma and harm, and the way that we invest in systems that respond to and prevent and intervene in trauma and harm, especially when it comes to our youth and our schools. And really excited about the movement in LAUSD, and that we're able to be pushing as well nationally.
And I just want to share, I haven't shared with you yet, Joseph, that I got a text yesterday from Miss Lewis at my daughter's school, and she's working with the Black Student Achievement Program. She shouted you out how much she loves you and Miss Tyler, and said, she really wants us to do some work. And now the Black Student Achievement Program enables that. And so, as we talk about what investments look like, the conversation that we had is about doing a Kwanzaa program on campus, right? And I was like, oh, I could totally come up there and do a Kwanzaa program, and we could do work with, the new College of Ethnic Studies at Cal State LA. And Miss Lewis has been a teacher in LAUSD. She started more than 30 years ago. And she said that she was moving into retirement and was scared to retire. Here's this Black woman who invested her entire adult life in building up Black students, and she was scared to retire because she didn't know who would be there for Black students. And she was saying, she's going to stay a little bit longer to make sure they don't mess this up. But it gives her, she started crying on the phone, right? And just said that it gives her such relief that she's able to entrust Black students to somebody. So, I don't want to become emotional, but, my children are there too. And I think that when you talk about Mona Rodriguez, when you talk about Jamila Lewis, when you talk about, Dejan's little brother, right? That we have to remember that when we build new systems of public safety, this is not about our theories. This is not about, they've been trying to kill our defund the police clarion call and calling it a snappy slogan, right? This is not about snappy slogans or theories. This is about our real children, our real people, our real community members. And so we're very grateful for the work that's happening in the names of those who've gone on, but also in the names of our young people, in the names of my real school children who were birthed from my body, right? And who I love more than anything, any theory, any belief system. That this is about protecting Amara and Amen, who are still in LAUSD. It's about protecting our real members of real community. And I'd love for you to kind of weigh in on that a little bit, Megan, like what it means for you as a real human being who really lives in Los Angeles, who is really doing work as I won't shout out your age, but I want to say how young you are, to have invested your life and really the spirit of Kenny Watkins that compelled you into that work. Can you share just a little bit for us?
Yeah. So, my journey into this work really comes from the death of my close friend, Kenny Watkins, who was shot by Los Angeles Police Department in his back. And so, that was a moment where the situations that were at hand came knocking at my door, right? And there was no turning back. There was no denying that Kenny didn't have to be murdered, right? Kenny didn't deserve to be murdered. And there was no way for me to really deny that. And so I kind of sprang into action, right? Having to be there to support his family, having to be there to support his younger sisters. It was a duty, right? It was a sacred duty. And so I think part of what we're raising here is like public safety within itself is a matter of public health, right? And so that means that we have to rid ourselves of having police within our communities, right? We know that the only way to really keep our community safe is to, limit the amount of interactions that we have with police. And so for me, if we truly want to save lives, right? If we truly want to build systems of care that are rooted in improving the well-being of all communities, that means that we have to build equitable approaches. That means that we have to be health-centered. That means that we have to be preventative and stop violence and harm before it even occurs, right? And we have to ensure that every community has what it needs to flourish, right? The reality is that racism and the carceral state itself has created a public health crisis, right? There's a dire need to emphasize holistic systems of care. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be housed in policing. We should rid ourselves of policing. And so when we begin to think of it that way, and think of the lives of Gashario Mack, and think of the lives of Riddell Jones and Kenneth Ross Jr., who were in dire need, right? Dire need, who were having mental health crises, and policing stole their lives, right? The state stole their lives. If we had systems of care and systems to respond to their needs, they would likely still be here, right? If we had systems that were equipped to support us as folks, as Black people, and as people of color, we'd have a lot more of our loved ones here. And that's just the reality. And so it's really important for me to just hone in on that, right? Like, that's how I keep hope alive, right? Realizing that there is another opportunity, another way of life, another way to live. We don't have to do it this way, right? I liken to your quote, Melina, that you always say, there's enough in the world for us to have what we need and most of what we want, right? We don't have to live in this deficit thinking. We don't have to reduce ourselves to what already is, but we can live, we can dream, we can believe in a better world where we all have what we need and we're all able to thrive.
Thank you for that, Megan. Megan, would you be offended if I share your age?
No, you can share it.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
So the reason I want to share your age is because a lot of times people think that people who are 24 years old don't care about the world around them. And I want to lift up that at 24 years old, your brilliance, your master's degree, your work is really driven by an intense love for your people. And I'm grateful, we're grateful that the spirit of Kenny Watkins, who was 18 years old when he was murdered by LAPD, right? We know that he was murdered in what they call a hot spot, right? They intentionally targeted Black community for demise, that it didn't push you out of work. As you said, it compelled you into work, that it caused you to heed your sacred duty. And we are so, so grateful because, you know, I like to pretend like, you know, I'm 29, but we all know that this gray streak tells you something different, right? And I think for me as a mom and as someone who has been on this earth a little longer, what you do as a 24-year-old who's completely committed your life, not saying you ain't having fun and doing all the things that 24-year-olds do. We love that you have fun and do all the things 24-year-olds do, but that you have the courage and vision to imagine and build and lead us towards something different. And so as we prepare for Amara to hop on, I'd love for you, Joseph, if you just want to kind of talk about what it means. So we've been talking about locally, that the work Reimagine LA with Megan at the helm, the work that the Schools LA Students Deserve with you at the helm, and you young too, you still got a 2 in front of your age too, right? But the work that you do is happening locally, but it also, as you said, is inspired and fueled by other local work, like the local work that was happening in Oakland. But what a People's Response Act, which would mean kind of a federal approach to reimagining and building new systems of public safety, what that would mean for you, Joseph?
Absolutely. And first, just want to use the local example to explain, how important and impactful this work can be. So Doc, you mentioned Lisa Lewis, right, who is a counselor at Hamilton High School. So her position at Hamilton this year was literally funded by the Black Student Achievement Plan, which was created as a result of our push to defund school police, right? So having, as you said, clearly another Black adult who cares so much and has so much love for our students at, the school that she's at is hugely impactful, right? And the funds for that position were literally redirected from funds that used to be going towards school police. So it is huge that both at a local level and at a national level, we're talking about, redirecting funds that have gone towards harming communities, towards incarcerating, towards, impacting, abusing, especially our youth, right? And one of the reasons this work is so impactful for me is this happened to me, right, as a student. And I was incarcerated, when I was growing up in Virginia. And so the fact that we're talking about pushing nationally for new forms of trauma response, new forms of violence and harm prevention and de-escalation and intervention is huge, right? The impact that the work on the ground, and again, Doc, we talked, you mentioned that BLM, the Black Lives Matter movement has been around for over 8 years now. And also have to name that the work that helped to form Black Lives Matter, and many of the folks, including the 3 founders and also Doc and other folks who were around at the very beginning, that work was predating the existence of the term Black Lives Matter, right? And so, this has been an ongoing struggle for our people, right? To really transform systems of oppression in this country. And this is really the newest, right, frontier of that struggle. We defeated, the system of slavery, the system of by law segregation, right? Even though we know that our schools and communities still remain segregated. We've defeated so many oppressive systems, and the push to defeat and transform the carceral system and abolish really the carceral system and the system of policing and incarceration that has so affected our communities on a national level is huge, is really huge. So I'm so excited to be a part of this work here on the ground and to be led by such amazing youth leaders like both of your daughters and your son, Dr. Abdullah, because the work that they have helped to push here in Los Angeles, and that has been inspired, like you mentioned, by folks in Oakland. And again, connecting this to the global impact that BLM has had. Back in 2016 or 17, Patrice helped connect us and Students Deserve to the Black Lives Matter Toronto chapter, who had worked to abolish schools in the Toronto public school system, right? And brought them out
school
here.
Police, right.
Abolish school police, right, sorry.
Right, yeah, we still want the schools, we just don't want police in them.
Absolutely. But yeah, so she helped connect us to them and help to inspire, have a meeting with youth to help inspire youth here about what is possible, right? About reimagining public and school safety and building the systems and investing in the systems and the resources and the care and the trauma-informed responses that we know that our communities need, and that we know especially that our students need and that our students deserve. And so the impact, again, of what we're doing here locally and the potential to continue to push for the expansion of this kind of work nationally with the People's Response Act and other pieces of legislation is huge, both, for the folks that we're working with, for my 13-year-old self, who didn't deserve to be in a cell, for Kenny Watkins, for so many of our folks, right, who deserve differently, right? And it's huge that we continue to push, led by our youth, for different solutions, different responses, especially for the next generation.
And can I just say that we're really winning, right? Like what you laid out, Joseph, is that we're winning, right? With Measure J, that allocates at least 10% of the county's unrestricted dollars from, policing and into communities. Like that's a win. When we talk about $187 million down payment for community investment, that's a win. And we really, which the net county cost for the county is like $1 billion with a capital B. We're coming for all those dollars, right? The youth remind me that we're coming for all those dollars. And so I'm very, very encouraged by the wins that we're having. And there's no time like now than to implement a People's Response Act, right? We should be uplifting the people. The people should be responding to our needs, and we should really be tending to ourselves. So I'm really excited about this.
I love that, Megan. I love that. That's what you're quoting the kids now as we were celebrating their cut, because they cut, like you said, Joseph, 1/3, 35%, actually more than a third, 35% of the budget of LAUSD police. And as we were celebrating that win, because I think that's the largest percentage win of any like defund the police effort, right? We had probably 50,000 people in the streets, and we pulled them up on these steps that were functioning as our stage, and we were big up in them, and we were saying, you did it, you cut $25 million 35%. And they said, yeah, that's not enough. We're coming for all of it. We're not stopping until we get all of it. And I just think that that is so courageous and visionary and brilliant of our young people to be coming for all of it. So, you know, we are victorious. Do you want to, Joseph, talk about the "when we fight, we win" that Megan left us with as we're waiting for Amara to try to figure out this link and join us?
Oh man, absolutely, right. And it's huge that our youth have that mindset to continue to push, and it's also really informed by their experiences, right? It's huge that we have these wins, and it is hugely unfortunate, not unfortunate, it is terrible, it is ghastly, you know, the things that our youth have to deal with in schools. The fact that Mona Rodriguez was murdered by a school security officer, the fact that our youth in LAUSD have been beaten, have been searched, have been criminalized, have been arrested, have been targeted by school police is horrible, right? And we know that, you know, again, even your children, right, Dr. Abdullah, have been, you know, subjected to criminalization by school police and other police that have been allowed onto school campuses. And so the wins are huge, and they are continuing to be pushed for and to be inspired by, unfortunately, the trauma that is continuing, right? Mona Rodriguez was killed less than 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, right? The same week, a man in South Central Los Angeles was shot by a Los Angeles school police officer, right? Outside of Carver Middle School. So the trauma that school police continue to inflict with their still over $50 million budget in LAUSD is huge and ongoing. And the fact that our youth are continuing to push, you know, for reimagining these systems, for redirecting these dollars, for investing in trauma-informed practices and resources and ways of being in their schools is huge, you know? And so, again, as somebody who was personally impacted, you know, as a 13-year-old, I know that what we need, what our youth need, what youth who are experiencing trauma, who are involved in conflict, who have stuff going on at home, who are experiencing housing insecurity or other things, they don't need police, right? They don't need a jail cell. They don't need handcuffs. They need resources. They need support. They need opportunities. They need investment. And that's what we're pushing for here in Los Angeles. And that's what the People's Response Act is helping to push for at the national level, a real reimagining and redirection of resources to help actually prevent and address the root causes of harm and trauma and conflict, and not to criminalize and further accelerate and escalate the conflict and the harm and the trauma in our communities in the way that the current carceral and policing systems do. So the wins, you know, that we're having, again, that are inspired and led by such amazing youth leaders. I'm so blessed to work with folks in LAUSD, current students like Sierra Leone Anderson, like Malia Frazier, like Laquel White, like so many other folks throughout LAUSD, like Brian Harris, like Antoine, like so many other student leaders who are pushing us forward is really inspiring for me. You know, again, folks who are experiencing this in schools every day and still have the courage to push back and to reimagine and to push us as adults to further imagine, you know, what this could be, what these responses could look like.
Ashe, thank you so much, Joseph. We're gonna say that the work that's being done in Los Angeles is really, really important and brilliant, and we're grateful for your leadership, for Megan's leadership, And we look forward to a People's Response Act that'll help us be even more impactful, both locally and throughout this country.